Well, hello friends, and welcome to another Ask Zach. Today we're going to have fun looking at my retro 90s pedal board. We're going to dive deep into this board and all the pedals on it. These are some of the pedals that I had back in the 90s, and then some reproductions that I had to use, like this 808. I had an original 808 and sold it, so this is a reissue, but otherwise these are my old pedals from the olden times. So yeah, we're gonna have fun. So while you're thinking about it, if you've been enjoying the show, subscribe. If you've already subscribed, please go to askzach.com and go to the store, and you can pick up a t-shirt or a mug, or there's the tip jar information in the description. So, all right. So this was kind of inspired by the Klon episode I did last week. And, you know, talking about the 80s and 90s and the beginning of the boutique stuff made me think about what I was using during that period of time, because I didn't have any boutique stuff. I guess you could consider this Demeter kind of a boutique thing. But otherwise it was, you know, Boss and Ibanez stuff. So let's talk about this board. So first off, this is a Boss BCB6 pedal board. It was originally released in 1983, and it really was the standard for pedal boards at the time. And of course it was limited in that it was really only designed to hold Boss pedals. You could put smaller pedals like you could with this Tremulator, but if you put anything bigger, like this 808 is actually slightly bigger than a Boss pedal, and so I had to hollow out some of the plastic. I just kind of chipped away at it. But yeah, that was the standard, and so that's what you saw on television. And so I used to, you know, stay up late at night after I was supposed to be asleep as a teenager, and actually probably, yeah, starting, you know, about 13, 14 years old. I would go to bed, and then after my parents went to sleep, I would go, and I had a little television in my room, and I had headphones. It had a headphone jack, and I'd plug that into it. And this was an old TV with, you know, rabbit ears on it, and I could get NBC, which that was the channel I wanted to watch, because I wanted to see The Tonight Show, you know, with Johnny Carson, and then after that I wanted to watch Letterman, because Letterman was my favorite, because I really liked the band, because I liked Doc Severinsen and the, you know, the jazz, you know, kind of TV jazz that they were playing, which was great, and I had respect for that. And also the musical guests they had great guests on The Tonight Show. But I really enjoyed watching The Most Dangerous Band, you know, on Letterman. And so I loved Hiram Bullock, the original guitar player, and he used one of these full of pedals. And Will Lee had one of these full of pedals, the bass player. And then when Hiram left, when they got Sid McGuinness, he had one of these too, and it was right there in plain view. You could see it. And then people would come on the show, and so you'd see guys, you know, whether it was The Tonight Show or Letterman. I remember seeing like John Jorgensen have one. I remember seeing John Leventhal, Duke Levine, who was playing with Mary Chapin Carpenter in the 90s, and you know, but you know, saw all these guys, you know, kind of using this board, and you know, I ended up just kind of finding one by, you know, blind luck. So my first, you know, to kind of give a little bit of context, my first pedal was a DoD chorus, and it got stolen from the high school equipment locker, you know, because I played in the jazz band in high school, and my little bag that had my chorus in it and a wah-wah that I had borrowed from a friend got stolen. And so I took care of my buddy who lost his wah-wah, and at least I think I did. And then I bought a CE2, you know, Boss chorus, you know, from the AMS catalog. And at the same time, I decided I wanted to try getting an overdrive pedal. So I got the Boss SD1, the yellow pedal with 3 knobs. Then I decided I really wanted to get into delay. And again, this is about 1990 at this point. And so I from Clausen's Music in Corpus Christi, Texas, hello Bob and Bubba, I ordered a Boss DD3 delay. And like many from that era, I was used to just using batteries in my pedals. So I get the DD3, I put a battery in it. Well, it lasts 1 gig, and then it starts, the delay time starts going away. And I'm like, what's wrong with this pedal? And my guitar teacher had to tell me, well, that's a digital delay. It'll eat a battery in a night. And he said, you're going to have to get an adapter for it. I was like, what's that? I mean, I didn't even know what the jack was on the back of the pedal. That's how ignorant I was. And none of the music stores in Corpus Christi even had 9-volt power supplies, and it was kind of like, you had to use the Boss power supply with it. There wasn't even the knowledge of, okay, it's a 9-volt center pin negative, and it's filtered and such. There was no knowledge of that. So I had to special order a Boss PSA 120 power supply. And this was back when it was a transformer, and it was heavier than, they don't make that power supply anymore. The one they make now is a digital switching power supply. So I got that. So now we get to, I was in my hometown of Kingsville, Texas, and there was only one music store there at that point because the Music Man that I'd worked at had closed. So there was this one store called Getch that was more of a piano shop. And then there were some pawn shops that would routinely have some interesting gear in them. So usually at least once a week, of course, I would go to the pawn shops. Well, I happened to be digging through this one pawn shop, and there was something that I guess I hadn't noticed before. But I found one of these boards in the back covered in dust, thick dust. So they didn't have a power supply to it, and the pedals were just sitting there. And I asked the owner, I said, what do you want for this? And he said, I don't know, $200? I said, well, how can I try it out? He said, I don't know. I said, well, how do we know if it works? He said, I don't know. So I said, well, I think I might have a power supply at home, but would you do $100 for the whole thing? Because it was the plastic board full of pedals, and it had, an analog delay, and it didn't have all these pedals in it, but it had this exact CS2 compressor and this red pedal, and it had the DM2. It also had like an EQ pedal and a CE3 chorus and some other things that I've gotten rid of through the years. And he agreed. And so I ran home, got my Boss power supply, plugged it in, but didn't play through it because I just wanted to make sure that it, everything powered up, because I didn't want to lose the deal. And I gave him my $100, and I took it home and I took everything apart and cleaned it, and then got it back together, and everything worked, perfectly. Everything was fine. I was just amazed. So anyway, so that's how I got my first pedal board, a Boss BCB6. And just to give a little, kind of context, it came out in 1983, and it was $140. And all it came with was the plastic board itself, the daisy chain, and the little Megami molded plugs. And that was $140, which in today's money would be $330 for what some guys on the gear page called a Tupperware pedal board. I think it's very handy. I love it. I mean, I kind of, after playing through this, I'm kind of tempted to go back to using something like this because it actually works really well. Okay, so in the board, starting off, you have the PSM5, and a lot of people thought this was a power supply. It's not, because the power supply has to plug into it, and then it has a daisy chain coming off of it. All this is an AB box. That's all it is. The way they set it up was where you would plug in the guitar here and your amp here, and then it would go in between either looping through all the pedals or going straight to your amp. I figured out pretty quickly what it was, and I wired it differently. And so what I did was I ran it to the tuner and then out on the last pedal so that I could switch in between either tuning, which also muted my signal so that I could tune or change instruments or go through the pedals. The TU-12, when it was released in 1983, it was $100, which is $236 in today's dollars. Is it starting to add up? This was an expensive board. Okay, so then, and the TU-12H is still a great tuner. You know, it's not like it's some inaccurate, horrible tuner. Okay, next you have the CS2, and the compressor was released in 1981 and went through 86, and then was replaced by the CS3. I loved this compressor, and I just thought it was a great sounding unit. And it's perfect for, you know, this kind of thing. It's hard to get that last chime in there, but yeah, like playing that Pretenders solo to Kid, which is one of my favorites. And Honeyman Scott actually used one of these live. I think in the studio when he recorded that, he used a Tele, you know, direct, and I'm sure they had like an LA2A or something like that. But yeah, CS2 is a great compressor. It's pretty squashy sounding. You know, even if you set the sustain low like I've got, where it's, you know, in that 9-10 o'clock range, it still has a bit of squash to it. But to me, this is, you know, this is what like Vince Gill and Stuart Smith and tons of guys were using these in the 80s, and then they went on to the CS3 later on. All right, then you have the 808. This is a reissue. Unfortunately, you know, I had a real one back in the day that I paid $30 for. And I sold it in the late 90s for $350, but I still regret it to this day. But so this is a reissue. The original 808 was $50 in 1979, which would be $150 in today's money, and the reissue TS 808 in today's money is $170. So it's more expensive now than it was when it was released, which I think is pretty funny. I haven't played through a Tube Screamer in forever, because I've been using, you know, my Distortions or the Karma, or you know, even a Nobles or something like that. And so it was a kind of a hoot to play through this. It has a lot of mid-range, and you know, we'll just turn this DD2 on too to kind of get the full effect, because that's the way I would have used it, was, you know, with the DD2 on, you can get the... It's a nice, yeah, it's fun to revisit the Tube Screamer. They don't sound as bad as I remember them sounding. I know that sounds elitist. So anyway, and of course, you had to have an adapter, which they didn't sell adapters at that point. So what I did was I went to Radio Shack and I got a female, you know, Boss style jack, and then I got a you know, an 1/8" plug, and I just wired them together. I soldered them together and made a converter so that I could plug the daisy chain into the 808 and use it on a power supply instead of having to run a you know, battery in it and then have to remember to unplug it. I had to do the same thing with this next one. So this is the Tremulator, which of course was released in '82 by Demeter. And of course, you know, with an often told story is, you know, that Ry Cooder wanted a tremolo pedal. No one was making one at that point. And so Demeter made one that was based on his Blackface Twin Reverb. So go to the neck pickup. We still have the 808 on. Yep. All right. So we're going to the neck pickup on the. This is my my Kubicki body Danocaster neck, adder neck pickup, Ron Ellis 60T bridge pickup, and it's got a Glaser B-Bender on it. And yeah. So here's the again. This is the compressor and the tremolo on. this pedal's been sitting in a box for years. I haven't used it, and it was nice to pull the pedal out again and hear it. And it's a great sounding unit. And I've heard that these early red knob ones are supposed to be good. I don't know. I think I paid. I can't remember what I paid, for that pedal, used many years ago. All right, so there's the Tremulator, and here's the Boss DM2, and this is the second version of the pedal. It doesn't have the coveted early chip. It has the later chip, which was also in the DM3. To me, still, I prefer actually the sound of the DM3 over the 2, no matter the different chip in it, because I think the 3 is cleaner sounding, and I just like it better. So, of course, I'm not going to get rid of this thing because I've had it forever, and its repeats are really kind of thuddy. So, but it's good on a Telecaster. You can go to the back pickup and... DM2 is great for fattening up a telly thing and getting a good slapback. The DM2, when released, was $200 in 1981, which would be like $472 today. Okay, that's more than what we think of as the inflated price that we pay for used ones. All right, the DD2. Might as well kind of give the stats on that. The DD2 was released in 1983. It was $220 then, which would be like $520 now. All right. This is the way I set it. I set it at the 800 milliseconds on the mode. I set it, straight up, and then the feedback and levels at 9 o'clock. So you get this kind of thing. The DD2, I think, is one of the sleeper delay pedals. I mean, they're still relatively cheap. They can be bought for in the $100 to $200 range, depending on how clean they are. Most of them in the $120 to $150 range. And to me, if I were only going to have one delay pedal on my board, because normally I use two, because you can tell, I had two delay pedals, one for long and one for short. It's like, but if I only had one, it'd be the DD2, because it just has that right. It's not as thuddy as the DM2, but it's not as clear as later pedals. And I don't know if it had to do with the big chip that was used on these or what, but these just have a really, really nice sounding repeat. And if I was only going to have one delay pedal, it'd be the DD2. That'll be another pedal I never, I'll never get rid of. So anyway, that's kind of the board. And what's really funny about this is, one, I need to talk about. So I was telling you how much each one of these pedals cost when new. So if I wanted to buy this board, back in the day, brand new, it would have been $1,120. And if I wanted to, and so if you take inflation into account, this would be $2,610. Yeah. So one of the real funny things about this is a realization, because you think that you're kind of evolving as a player, and sometimes you're kind of coming around full circle. So I'm going to put my guitar down, and so this, of course, was the pedal board I used in the 90s. Well, this is the board I use now. Notice any similarities? They're both straight in line. They both have a tuner, a compressor, a tremolo, an overdrive, and 2 delay pedals. It was kind of this weird thing of finding out, you know what? I'm using the board I used back in the 90s, but just kind of a, I don't know, maybe a slightly updated or, version. So of course, this has an isolated, power supply on it and is more compact. But yeah, you have a different flavor of distortion. But there you have it. All right. Well, guys, I hope you've enjoyed today's episode where we took a look back at these old pedal boards that, again, I saw my heroes use back in the 80s and 90s and that I had and used for a long time. Probably it was until, the 2000s that I got a, pedal train board or something like that. So anyway, well, I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.